Hello and welcome back to another out of spec detailing video here from Clear Detailing in Northern Colorado. Next to me here we have a 2024 Kia EV6 Wind all-wheel drive, and today we're going to be taking this thing through a full build quality analysis, looking at the panel gaps, the fit and finish on the exterior, and then jumping inside to talk about material choices, how everything feels inside. Now, the interesting thing with this car is this is actually my new vehicle. I just leased this from Kia of Fort Collins, got a smoking deal that I'll touch base with you guys on just a second here. But I really want to see, is this Kia a $55,000 MSRP car? Does it really feel like it's built that well? And what are some of the pros and cons versus other EVs in this segment? So welcome back. Let's jump into it. Now this 2024 Kia EV6 Wind all-wheel drive next to me retails for right at $52,600. When you start adding in a few different options like this one has, such as the paint, some floor mats, the mirror, and some other destination fees, we're looking right about $55,000. Now initially to me, that is a lot of money for a Kia especially. Now Kia has been really trying to get these EVs into an interesting space. Of course, we've done the EV9 on this channel as well. When you can Mac Daddy spec those things out to $78,000, I think it's kind of a hard play for a lot of people to purchase a vehicle at that price. Now, the interesting thing that I think is going on in the market that we need to touch on with this is that leases are becoming a big deal, especially with vehicles that are not made here in the States. Of course, if vehicles are not made here in the States, they have a tax loophole to get the $7,500 federal tax credit into the lease, of which you cannot get in a purchase. So I'm going to caveat this video in saying we are going to review this car as a $55,000 MSRP vehicle. It's important to know that because this is more expensive than something like a Model Y Performance, which I would say arguably would be one of the more clear choices here. But what you can find on the market as well, which I do need to note on, is the amazing lease deals. So I leased this vehicle from Kia of Fort Collins, and I put $1,500 out of pocket, which includes all my taxes and fees, all my dealer fees, all of my first month payment, $1,500 out of pocket, and I'm paying $187 a month to lease this thing for 2 years and 20,000 miles. An absolutely smoking deal. So I would say, if you're in the market of this kind of mid-size EV, SUV type characteristic here, go do some research and see, because honestly, I think really even my expectation is just get a Model Y. But there's a lot of interesting lease deals if you're not interested in purchasing, if leases make sense to you. So now that we've got that covered, let's jump into the EV6 here. Now this is a very interesting vehicle and honestly not one that was on my radar all of that much, but it features some very interesting things. So this has the 77 kilowatt hour pack in it. It is also all-wheel drive, and it is also 800-volt architecture. Now, we're going to be doing a 10% challenge on the Out of Spec Reviews channel with my exact car here, so do stay tuned for that because these things are absolutely charging monsters. And there's also some really cool features in this vehicle that I think are different from, vehicles like Tesla and the ID4 and Mustang Mach-E. It's a really interesting car, but honestly, it hasn't really been in my radar. Now, of course, recently, I say recently, probably a year ago, we did the EV6 GT, the full spec, full spicy version of this EV6, and a lot of interesting things in that car. Again, very expensive, I think, compared to other vehicles on the market. When you look at these cars on paper, it's like, just go Model Y. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about that, but do keep in mind the lease deals. So let's start on the exterior, doing a full build quality analysis. So first off here, the Kia EV6, a very interesting design to say the least. This car looks quite large in camera, but I'll tell you, it actually feels quite small when you're up next to it. Now, the interior space is probably one of the more interesting because with this slope back design here, you would really think it's compromised, and in certain ways it is. But I gotta say, this thing is definitely one of the more interesting vehicles that's an EV on the road as far as its appearance. It's very sleek and slippery looking, very different to its sister car, the Ioniq 5, of course. And you have this very distinct eyelet up here, if you will, in the front headlights with some very nice looking running lights. Now, I gotta say, this car in lower tiered trims definitely looks a little bit more rental car spec, if you will, especially on these 19-inch wheels, which I'm not a huge fan of. Now, the wind version sits kind of in the middle of the road. There is a light that sits below this. You can get it in long range form, in rear wheel drive form, in all wheel drive form. Kia is very complicated, I would say, in knowing exactly what you're getting. Then above this is the GT line, not the full GT, and then above that is the GT. Now you'll see some differences with some painted arches on the GT line and GT, different front and rear bumpers. So we're gonna evaluate this just as the wind here. The front hood is very large on this, and you'll be surprised to know that there's not much space under the front trunk, but it's this very interesting clamshell design here. What I do like about this vehicle is they really went kind of out of the park with the design language. It's so different from everything else. I mean, just the headlights here, how this bar basically wraps around the whole front end, which you'll see that same design language on the rear. Now, just for curiosity, I'm sure you guys are wondering, this is my exact build on my vehicle. So 52,600 has the wind all-wheel drive, 320 horsepower, 446 foot-pounds of torque. It's quick, I would say. This does have a heat pump. Ooh, heated steering wheel, very nice there. Glacier paint's about 500 bucks, carpeted floor mats, auto dimming mirror with home link, and that puts us at 54,995 with destination and handling. So call it 55,000. But let's jump into the exterior fit and finish here. So first off, the hood, a very interesting design. Like I was saying, this all feels quite nice. Now here on this very interesting looking fender, can see how nice all of the gapping is there. And I think you're gonna see on this vehicle, it's a very well built car, but when you get inside, there is a lot of cheapness, and you just start to find cheapness all the way around, and it really comes to do with plastic. Now, one of my biggest negatives as a professional detailer is no matter the color you get, you basically have the whole, I don't know, bottom quarter in gloss piano black. That's gonna, of course, scratch up quite easily. And again, the other trims will have different arches and different things like that. So I'm just evaluating it on this. But this arch is definitely interesting. You have this kind of ribbed situation going on here. I would hate to be compounding and polishing this out quite often. Not a huge fan of that. The headlights in this, LED headlights even on the base trim, and they are quite decent at night, but they definitely don't seem to reach quite as far as you would necessarily expect. But all of this gapping up here looks extremely tight. I'm not noticing anything that's like standing out to me going, ooh, that's aligned quite weird. This does have your radar down here, and I have removed the front plate if you're wondering what those two dots are in there. I hate that dealerships just automatically drill plates in the front. That's a big no-no for me, so do take that into consideration when you're purchasing a car if you're OCD like me. I just don't like that. But then you get this really cool angle on this vehicle. It's kind of sculpted, but then you get some angular stuff going on here. It's a very unique and interesting car. This, of course, does have ultrasonic sensors, unlike the Tesla Model Y. Now, my experience with Teslas, if you're the first time watching this channel, I own two of them. One of them is right over there, a Tesla Model 3 Performance, a 2023. I also have a 2021 Model 3 long range as well. So I'll share a little bit of Tesla experience that I've had compared to this as we go through this video. Now, again, everything down here looking all pretty nice. I really have no complaints with this front end as far as fit and finish. Everything fits very nice, and I'm quite surprised, especially with how large this hood is and how intricate everything is down here. Now, again, we also have this satin aluminum, I guess you would, down here that wraps the whole length of the bottom of the car. Changes with trims. I'm not a huge fan of it. I will actually be wrapping it on this vehicle because it's a lease, as well as with the wheels, just to kind of black it out and look a little bit more unique. Now, moving up here to our A-pillar. Quite a large A-pillar here, and actually visibility from the inside is quite decent, even though it does feel a little bit more of like this it's a true crossover. It kind of feels like a sedan at times, and then it kind of feels like an SUV. I don't really know how to characterize it here, but we have some very interesting designed mirrors here where you have these kind of corner flaps. They almost look and remind me of like cat ears or something like that. This one does not have the tech pack, so I do not have the cameras that go down the side, basically when you turn on the blinkers. So I would say there's some negatives in that you really have to pay up with Kias. You kind of have to, spec the right options, whereas something like that comes on the cheapest Model Y and a lot of its other competitors. So some stuff like that I would say is a little bit of a negative. But in here we have nice turn signal lights in there looking all good. I don't see anything in here that I would complain about as far as fit and finish. And I think honestly, you guys are going to hear me say that throughout the entirety of the exterior. Now, one thing I really don't like about the lower trim EV6s is the door handles. So with the GT line, you get auto presenting door handles. Now, the annoying thing for me, these are the opposite way of my Model 3. So of course, in a Tesla, you press the back side here and the handle comes out. These go the opposite way. So I'm like, every time I go back and forth between these, I've only had this car a week, but I'm like, which way do I go? And I do think it's quite annoying that these are not auto presenting. They're a little odd to fumble, I would say, but they're not too bad. It has a nice mechanical feel on it. Doesn't feel cheap. Again, one of the cheapest door handles that I always complain about is Mercedes EQ line of all of them. Just a terrible feeling door handle. And for me, when you get into a vehicle, your first impression is how the door handle feels. If it feels very cheap, you're kind of going to expect more cheapness on the inside and the rest of the vehicle. When it feels nice and solid, great, we've got a good start there. So I would say this is okay, but it is just annoying to use. Now this area back here is actually how you lock and unlock the car. And I found this to be very inconsistent. So when you walk up to it with a key, what's really weird, the mirrors unfold, but the car doesn't auto unlock. Why is that not a feature? It's probably buried somewhere in menus, but you're having to press this to unlock it, and then you have to do one of these situations. So a little bit of an annoyance there. Now this trim that runs down here on the EV6 right below the window, I would say is where I start to feel some of that very cheap Kia-ness in it. It just doesn't feel as premium. You have this really kind of sharp, cheap plastic in here. It's not the end of the world, but it's just something as a professional detailer that I notice because I work on all this, trying to polish these out to absolute perfection. And some of these seals, like you can see up here, the seal is kind of peeling away from that. I'd like to see that tucked in a little bit, more so how it looks here. And these just all feel cheap in my impression. So not a huge fan of that, but they do fit very nice. You can see even in the B pillar area here, everything lining up quite nice. And all the way down the door, absolutely flush. We have a nice rubber seal all the way through. Everything is perfectly even here. So honestly, so far, not seeing any sort of body misalignment or anything that I would complain about traditionally with other vehicles. Moving back here to the rear door, same thing going on. I just don't love the cheapness here, but it's all put together very well. Even moving down here to the rear door into this very interesting hip, if you will, on the rear of the car. This all fits absolutely flush and perfect. And again, this is the same kind of ribbed situation going on here. I don't know, not a huge fan of it in my impression. Now, on this car, I do not have a sunroof, and there's pros and cons to that. So this I really bought to be my dog car. Now, my Model 3 Performance over here, I don't have it tinted, but I'll tell you, especially here in Colorado as of late, it's been 95, almost 100 degrees. AC is just ripping in the Model 3, trying to keep up with all that sunlight coming in. Yes, I do know tint could help on that, but I found this to be quite nice with the aircon because the rear windows are already pre-tinted. and there's no sun coming in the whole glass sunroof like this or something similar on a Model Y. So pretty impressed with that. Spoiler design up here is different. This car just, they really went all out on design in this, and just like, we don't really care what people think. And I think this is kind of a love or hate it looking car, but I think it's quite unique and interesting. Even up here at night, you have little lights under here. Let me see if I can get a good angle of those. And they kind of shine down throughout the entire side of the car. Just something that you really don't see on other vehicles. Now back here is probably my favorite on the vehicle. First off, you have this huge light bar. And I think it looks very premium. It looks extremely nice. Like, it is just so cool, especially at night when you're just standing kind of at this angle here. Looks so neat, and I love how it follows through. What I don't really love though is this trim down here. It's a very unique design, I would say. Again, just talking through this, I'd like to see options to have this all blacked out. Now, of course, in the GT line, these are slightly different colors, but they're still kind of like a dark chrome effect color. And just, I don't know. But I will say, like, stuff like this, again, feeling that cheapness. Like, why do we need a fake little vent in here? I don't know. Not the biggest fan of that. Now, one thing I am noticing here, this does not fit perfect whatsoever. Hopefully you can see that. The middle light bar here definitely sits up a little bit. How does this side look? Definitely sits up a little bit. So wonder if this trunk, yeah, I can actually feel it here on the side. This trunk feels like it needs to sit down a little bit, so I can probably play with that, but definitely its first real strike here. I'd like to see this a lot more flush. What is flush though is this body gap all the way down. Perfectly even on both sides, so I'm very glad to see that there. So I'd say, yeah, trunk just needs to sit down ever so slightly there. Now down here, yet again, one of my largest complaints is you have a ton of piano black. This stuff scratches so easily, and I'm sure you're saying, well, why not just PPF it? How the heck are you going to PPF this? Like, we just have such a crazy design on here. And I would say that's one of the things that I really don't love about this is, you know, for me loading dogs up, I'd prefer to throw them in through the trunk. This is just going to get absolutely hammered here. And then you have these extremely sharp edges, which are, yeah, not ideal there. I'm glad that you don't have this huge like step down here, but those little tips on there, a little bit weird. Let's close this down and see how nicely or not nicely it closes. Pretty smooth, very quiet. Interestingly, you can change the speed of your rear trunk in the settings. Why you would ever need that? I don't know. Do you want it to be slow? For me, I'm like, throw that thing up in 2 seconds so I can throw the dogs inside there. But everything's looking quite good back here, except for the little tail light area there. Now this is your charge port here. A very weird location, I have to say, because it very much feels like it's on the back of the car, and not ideal when you have your garage set up to charge a Tesla and now the port's on the wrong side, and also with that literally at the back. Now this is perfectly fine for, you know, everything else. I'm just giving my opinion on that. It does feel a little strange. What I do like about this though, it is powered. It's a very simple mechanism, not something crazy like Rivian or, you know, Lucid, other vehicles like that, or even Taycan where it's sliding up into the body panels. This seems fine. I'll be curious to see, you know, over time, is this going to start to wear out? Is it going to be weird? One thing I did notice on here is that the first day I had it, I was sitting here pressing and pressing and pressing that, and it didn't really interact with me. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted on how that goes. But the cool thing here, we have charge indication here. So state of charge, I'm sitting right under 50%, I think right about 45% now. Shows me that with the 2 lights. That is very cool. We also have lights in here. You can close it, of course, from there. Now this, not the best implementation. This drives me nuts, guys. Like, people need to take note of what BMW and some other vehicles do out there where they basically have 2 flaps. They're plastic, they stay on here. This to me is just very chintzy. It's like, I get it. You need to have something over that when you're AC charging, it's raining outside. You don't want a ton of water getting in the DC pins. But like, we need better solutions for, premium vehicles, especially at 55,000 bucks. Now moving down the side here, we do have some more ultrasonic sensors. So here in the bumpers, those are looking good. Nothing really here on the side, which is interesting. Seems to be quite good, I would say, so far. No real complaints from me there. Moving down to the doors, this all yet again looks quite literally perfect. I have zero complaints. I'm looking down the side. Everything is perfectly aligned here. So one real area on this entire exterior that I have any sort of complaints about would be that rear tail light doesn't fit exactly perfect. Now, I will say Teslas have been a huge issue in the past for me. So let me explain. This Model 3 Performance, this one's brand spanking new. This customer picked it up, I guess 2 weeks ago or so now. The car showed up with a cracked sunroof. He had to get the cracked sunroof replaced. He also needs to get some of these doors realigned. This is just stuff you deal with Tesla because they don't fit perfectly flush. Like every door needs some massaging with it. My Model 3 Performance over here, when I purchased it, I had quite a few things wrong with it. Every single door on here needed to be kind of massaged and pulled in or pushed out a little bit. I had a headlight that was completely broken. They had to come literally a week after I purchased my vehicle, tear the entire front bumper off, replace a headlight. That's some of the annoyances that you deal with Tesla. So again, what I'm saying here is I do love Teslas, but just to tell everybody, somebody who appreciates a nice vehicle that they're not going to have a ton of issues with. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to have issues with this EV6. I'm just saying from my experience with Teslas, they never come in perfect. It seems to me like Tesla just slaps the car together. They send it out to the service center. If someone complains, you bring it back. They're great with fixing stuff, but it's just that a little bit of annoyance of having to get a new vehicle, take it back because the doors don't fit right. And if you're watching this going like, who cares? You're on the wrong channel. This is a very OCD type channel. Like this customer with this Model 3 Performance literally told me how annoying it was because he looks out his rear view mirror and that, right below the B pillar doesn't line up perfectly and it just drives him nuts every time he looks out the mirror. So there are folks who do care about that. So exterior fit and finish, very good. My biggest gripes yet again, lots of gloss black here. Very economy spec looking car, I would say, for a $55,000 car, especially when you can get a Model Y Performance with the big wheels. Like I would say Model Y definitely looks slightly more premium than this in certain ways, but slightly less premium in other ways. I don't know. I'm going to leave that to you guys, but pretty darn impressed with exterior fit and finish. So next, let's jump into the inside. And I think we're going to spend a lot more time here because there's a lot of good inside. But I would say most of my negatives with this car come from the interior plastics. So here we go, jumping inside the Kia EV6 now. And this has the light kind of gray interior in it. There is a black option. And I would say I quite like this interior. The reason I went with this, it not only kind of matches this exterior. I don't know if it's more cream, if it's kind of gray. It very much changes, but you can tell how nicely the seats match here. The other rationale behind that is, of course, my Model 3 Performance over here, I got with white seats. White interiors seem to clean up better with dog slobber, dog dirt and grime. I know it's counterintuitive, but makes a lot more sense. So first off, let's just start here on the door panel. Now, door panel, pretty plain, I would say. Nothing that strikes me as, wow, this is a $55,000 car. It honestly looks like any other vehicle you get into. Nothing immediately striking here. The materials up here, it's all somewhat soft touch, but this is where you start to feel a little bit of the cheapness in this car compared to, something even like the new Model 3 Performance. A lot of the materials have improved quite a bit, but compared to a Model Y, I would say it's pretty similar. I would say Tesla maybe has a slight advantage up here. This is an area I'm always concerned about in vehicles because a lot of folks rest their elbows up here or even down here, but that area should be soft touch and it should feel quite high quality. Now in here we have another soft touch material, which is actually the same color, but much more soft touch. That's a little harder. This is a little softer. I don't know, just feels a little bit bit better. One thing I do appreciate in the lower trim EV6s, which is quite funny, Kia, of course, is one of those manufacturers that thinks gloss black is more premium when a lot of us complain about having gloss black. So if you get a GT line, these are all gloss black. They're going to get scratched to absolute heck. So I'm glad to see that these are something different, kind of ties in nicely with the interior, different contrast color, but definitely feels totally adequate. Buttons here all feel nice and clicky, completely fine. No real complaints there. I'm not one of those people who really thinks you need like these gloss piano black buttons. They just look like crap after, you know, a couple months in the car. We have large grab handles here. Gotta say they do feel quite nice. Do you prefer this over a button? I don't know. There is something about a nice mechanical feel here. Some more plastics in here. This is that same soft touch that wraps around all the way here. Then in here is where you get to absolute garbage plastics. And you'll hear me talk a lot about really, really, really bad plastics in this car. That's my biggest negative out of all of it. But moving down here, we do have Meridian sound in the Wind trim. This is standard for the Wind. GT and GT line also get this as well. This will not be found in the Light. Gotta say, not blown away with the sound system in this. Model Y and Model 3 definitely sound better in my impression. Audio is very, very subjective. So go sit in the car. You need to go be test driving these cars. If you're cross shopping a Model Y and an EV6, just go drive them and see which one you prefer more. Now down here, some interesting things going on. This plastic, it almost looks like it's like chipped up in there. It's kind of cool, and I'm kind of wondering why like they didn't do that more places, like down here on the seat bolsters and things like that. I don't mind that it has a texture, but yeah, very cheap when you touch it. And that's, again, just not super nice. In here, we do have this carpeted kind of area to throw some water bottles. Doesn't feel like very nice carpet at all. I'm huge into having nice carpet in vehicles. Yeah, funny enough, I owned a Kia and, you know, 2 Model 3s. They're not the nicest, and they're a pain in the butt, especially if you have dogs like myself to get dog hair out of. They definitely hold on to lint and things like that a lot more, so a little annoying there. This material is interesting. Yeah, this is just all hard plastic here. You would think that it's kind of like, you know, what's on the seats. Why not put that material over here? Make it feel a little bit nicer. I don't know. It's just a little strange. Now, moving inside here. Seats are definitely quite unique looking. I do like Kia's new headrests, and kind of one thing I would really love to do, I would like to take the EV9 headrests and put them in here. Literally the best headrests on the entire market, like up there with Mercedes, you know, S-Class products with the little pillows and things like that. They have this memory foam mesh in there. It is unbelievably nice and really, really like them. So maybe I'll try and steal one off a car or just purchase some. Probably would be a better option. But inside here, honestly, not a bad place to spend some time. We have some very interesting color choices and material choices going on. We do have a full kind of same beige-ish kind of gray headliner here. I'd like to see those in black, probably in the top trims. Of course, you can do that. But it's a very spaceship vibe in here, I would say. But then when you start interacting with things is where things kind of start to fall apart a little bit. So like up here, you would think this is like a nice woven cloth. This is just like plastic. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a very strange material. You can see it there on the edge. It's kind of shiny. It's like it's cloth and then they like put some sort of plastic texture over it. Not a huge fan of that, but it does look aesthetically nice. The only time you interact with it is when you kind of rest your hand here on the ledge to interact with the screen. Not my most favorite thing. Seats here are very comfortable. And importantly here, they are ventilated. So we have aircon in the seats and they're heated as well. That's nice to have. So you can see that up here in the center console panel. I do actually really enjoy the ventilated seats, and they are probably some of the best that I've sat in any manufacturer. Kia just has these things, you know, on 11. They really cool you down quickly. So glad to see that. So jumping into the driver's seat now, doing the weird kind of hand movement you have to do here. One thing I will say is seat controls down here, these all feel extremely cheap. This kick panel down here, extremely cheap. This feels extremely cheap. It's like almost the top half of the car is, or maybe the top third of the car is really nice. And then everything below it that you interact with doesn't feel the greatest. Over here on the driver's side, we do have memory seat controls, which work substantially better than our Volkswagen ID4. So my wife drives an ID4. Every single time I get into the car, it loses where my memory seat was. It is the most infuriating thing out there because I'm sitting, like she sits so close to the wheel that I can barely get into the seat. And then I push it in my position, it goes all the way back or all the way up. And I'm just like, how is this still a thing? So quite a bit of an annoyance there. We do have more panels or buttons over here. Of course, fold your mirrors, some mirror controls here. This to me, really no complaints. I do like that you have this little cubby here. You can throw, keys in there. That's one thing about this car. It's not like a Tesla. You do have a key fob. And I like the key fob, I guess. I don't know. I like the lock button. It feels like you're kind of hitting a grenade or something here. And then we have unlock. We can obviously pop up the rear trunk. And then this is the interesting one here, is hold. You can actually turn on the climate from here. Now, range is good with it, but it doesn't really give you any controls. Personally, the app is okay. It's not quite as good as Tesla. And you'll see inside here, software is one of the biggest gripes other than cheap plastic. So let's jump in here. And we've jumped in the EV6 here. I'm going to get a little aircon going. My cooled seat is on. And honestly, very spaceship vibes in here. I do like that this is more of a cockpit compared to the Ioniq 5, which this whole center console is just kind of missing. But there's a lot of functionality going on down here. So first off, 2 cup holders in a very nice spot. And then you have this kind of junk drawer, I would say. That's how I've been using it back here. This piece also slides out. Again, a little plasticky, but totally adequate and fine for this particular area. You do have a wireless phone heater here, which I have used and it actually seems decent because of these little ventilations in here. The other thing that's quite cool is when it's charging, this orange light illuminates here. And then moving up here, so we have a few different functionalities. This will pull up your parking camera. Honestly, coming out of Tesla's quite potato, especially compared to hardware 4. Now again, with a tech pack, this would have, cameras here below the mirrors. They'd come up in your instrument cluster here when you are switching lanes. It would also give you 360-degree view. So I would say this is not the greatest, but honestly, for a lower trim, I think they should all come with that, especially considering the competition does. Now this one does have a on-off button. Coming from Teslas, this is very annoying. There has been so many times, probably I can count 10 times where I've gotten out of the car while I've been driving it this last week and just leave the car on. And then it's, won't lock and it's bonging at me. And then I'm like, gosh, really? Like, why when you get out of the car and press lock, would it not just shut off? It's very annoying in that sense. But down here, we have our little shifter. So you can just turn this, boom, right into drive. You have park here, can go neutral and reverse. My biggest complaint about this is you have to have your foot on the brake to go from, drive to reverse or vice versa. Whereas Tesla, you just have it up here and you can go within 5 miles an hour, boom, reverse, boom, drive. It's just those little annoying things, I would say, and something that I would like to see improved over time. Steering wheel, lots going on here. Very small. When you get into it, the steering wheel just seems almost too small for the cockpit. I've definitely gotten used to it. I don't know. What do you guys think about the steering wheel design here? Very interesting how it's this two-tone. So you have the gray up here that matches the rest of the dash, and then this matches your seats. I think it's okay. It does have a heated steering wheel in this one. I'll be curious to see how like these kind of metal accents are when it's absolutely freezing outside. I feel like those are just going to radiate cold, but we'll see. Now on the steering wheel, lots of controls going on here. So we have audio controls. This switch is absolutely amazing. A nice tactile feel on all of these. Super impressed with these. They also are physical buttons, which is very cool. Compared to something like our ID4 where they're all haptic, much prefer this. On this side here, you can change things up here in your display. You can see, which wheels are being powered in this. And then you have your drive assist. Now, this is going to be very controversial. I prefer the drive assist far more than Tesla Autopilot or FSD. It seems to me to just be a lot more consistent, and it doesn't just do random crap that I don't want it to. We took this down to Denver, just, threw it in the express lane, boom, ready to go. Didn't nag me the whole time. It was very, very nice. So pretty impressed with this. FSD, I've been quite a large critic of it, so sorry Tesla folks, but I am just not a huge fan. So back here, we also have paddles, which I think is just strange in an EV. Why do we need these? So these are for regen settings, which you can see changing here. This has multiple modes of regen. Let's see if we can get it to focus. So it's on level 3. We need to be in drive. Go to level 2, 1, 0, and then you can go all the way back up with the left one. And iPedal is the one that I drive in the most. Now, the interesting thing with this car is the amount of regen. This thing does huge regen. I've been driving this and then got back in the Model 3 and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having to use the brakes all the time because this just has so much more regen than the Tesla, which I really, really enjoy. And it is kind of cool that you can switch between the levels here. The thing that's odd is when you go into level 3 or below, you coast once you get up to a near stop. Very similar to Volkswagen ID4, how you have the brake mode, but it will do it to like 6 or 4 miles an hour, and then you have to hit the physical brakes, which a little bit annoying. Down here we have our drive mode button. It's in a weird location to me. Like, it really should be over here in my impression. There's so much space going on over here that I think this would be better suited, but small complaint for me. Now, screens in this, they're not that nice, let's be honest. Tesla has way better screens in their cars. Much prefer the UI in Tesla. Much prefer the technology. Software is a big letdown on this car. I would just tell you, I'm not going to go through all the software stuff in this, but it is just so much easier to jump in a Tesla, put in your destination, plans all the routes. Like, everything is so top-down integrated in Tesla that if you're a very tech-forward person, I think the Tesla is going to be interesting. The odd thing about this car that I think is a little bit of a negative is there's so many settings that, I'm imagining, putting a grandparent of mine or even my dad that likes tech and have him go through this. There is just too many settings in here that I think is a little bit of a negative. So that's my end of my rant on software. Now this down here, I really didn't like this in the EV6 GT that I did, but I really like it driving the car. So let me explain a little bit. So you can see we have some buttons down here so you can actually not press on those. Okay, so these you can. I'm still getting used to the system, as you can kind of tell here. But over here, you change your climate on these scroll wheels. You can do it on either side. You can sync those up. You have auto climate, boom, boom, boom. And then you hit this little button, and these actually change. So this is your volume knob, and this changes your file, and now you have a bunch of different settings. Now you can have it either stay at whichever screen you go to here or default to one. I have it defaulted to climate because I think it's one of the ones that I actually use the most. Now, speaking of climate, big negative. Big negative. We're in 2024, folks, and this Kia EV6 does not have pet mode. Companies need to wake up. There is a ton of us who have dogs out there that like to go explore and do adventures and not just leave our dog at home, and not having a pet mode is really annoying. Now, there is a way to do this, and let me explain this walkthrough to leave climate on in your vehicle. Now, you may want to do this for a few reasons. Maybe you're quickly running into the store, want to keep the climate cool. The only way you do that, now I need to remember how to do it here, is you go into EV mode. I had this set up before. Now it's going to take me a minute. But why is there not just a pet mode on here? It's really annoying. I don't remember how you do this. Oh no. Kyle's going to be very disappointed in me. Yeah, I don't even remember how to get to it. Okay, hold on a second. Swipe EV That's the same menu I was in. Settings. Yeah, I have no idea. Oh, utility mode. Here we go. Okay, so you turn this on. Great. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll down your window. And yes, I'm not kidding. This is the only way to leave your climate on. You get out of the vehicle, close it, and then you, through the window, you press lock here and then roll the window up and the car will be locked. That's the only way to leave climate on. But it doesn't tell you anything in here that says, hey, my dog's in here, they're comfortable, the AC's on. Yes, you may see the screens are on, but it's just like, how easy would it be to just have dog mode or camp mode or something like that? This is just annoying. I really, really, really dislike this, and all vehicles need to have this. So now I need to, I guess, turn that back on. Oh no, it's just glitchy. Like, we don't need to be this complicated with it. So that's my gripes. Now up here, I do have a HomeLink mirror in here. This button literally feels like it's gonna fall out. I don't know if you guys can see that. You can see that one on the very right is not really placed all that well. Yeah, definitely weird and annoying there. Up here, we do have touch sensitive lights, which are, okay, quite nice. We also have, you can turn all of them on. They do seem quite nice, very bright. Now, one thing that's gonna be hard to show you here is these sun visors. And this is just where I have to chuckle. First off, largest mirror ever. Hello. But the light doesn't automatically come on. You have to press this button on. Like, how much cheaper can we get than that? You really can't put, you know, a couple dollar motion sensor in there. Like every other car, when this opens, that light goes on. Just weird things like that, Kia. Like, why do you do that? I don't know. Cost savings. Now, down here, we have this huge storage thing that is nearly impossible to get to. Like, I can barely touch it just sitting in my normal driving position. I don't know what people actually use this for other than crap, I would assume. Now, what you're also going to notice down here, USB ports. This is a Type A port over here and Type C. The annoying thing, CarPlay on this is wired. No wireless CarPlay in EV6. Supposedly this is coming up through a software update. We'll see how that goes in my 2 years of experience. It is a major annoyance. Now, I will be the first one to tell you I'm not a huge CarPlay person, but I would say the only thing that kind of makes up for the software is that you have CarPlay. So my interaction with the vehicle 9 times out of 10 is not using this absolutely heinous looking map system here or your navigation menu or anything like that. And you can see how many times I have to press things on the screen. It is just not very intuitive, nor does it look very good. It just looks like such basic software in here, and it doesn't feel responsive. Not super thrilled with that so far, but I will say I do somewhat like it more than the ID4. The ID4 is unbelievably laggy. So one thing I would say is neat is that I get to have a lot of different experiences with cars, being of course without a spec, but now living and owning these things of an EV6, an ID4, and 2 Teslas. You can really see where some have their positives and some have their negatives. Tesla having a huge positive in their software, this and the ID4 both being arguably 2 of the worst software systems out there. So everything else up here I would say is decent except for the armrest. The armrest is very cheap feeling and doesn't really latch down. It's kind of just wobbling everywhere always. But you do have a nice large storage container down here. So I think that's it for the front end. Honestly, nice materials up top. I would like to see these be a little bit nicer, especially for 55 grand. You know, like we don't have any other real textured materials. Like Tesla does have their micro suede here, but you get into other vehicles and they do some very interesting things even at this price point that I think Kia could level this up. And obviously most people are going to say, oh, just get the GT line and then spend even more money than a Model Y Performance, or, you know, what's more equivalent to this, a Model Y long range. So I'm going to jump in the back here and talk what's going on back there. Now, jumping into the back seat, let's first talk about the door panel back here. Now, that is something that absolutely drives me up a wall in a car. Put the same materials in the back seat that you do in the front seat. It's funny with vehicles, and I see this a lot. It's like they almost do the first row is like a business class, thinking of like an airplane, and then economy plus. And then like the third row, if it had a third row, is like literally you're sitting at the last row of an airplane, sitting next to the toilet. Like everything is crap back there, whereas the front of the car is super nice. I wish companies would carry all the materials through. This immediately, just having hard plastic back here, huge negative. And it's like, why can't you just put that material there? Don't really like that at all. Now, the back of the seats, same absolutely heinously terrible plastics. This is not good at all. Now, one thing I will tell you back here is you do have a decent amount of headroom. Now, I do have the headrest removed. Again, I have 3 golden retrievers and I don't want them tearing up the headrest. I'll show you with the seats down what it looks like, but I have a decent amount. Like, I could sit and kind of lounge back here. It'd be okay. I do have decent legroom. This is sitting behind what is the entry mode, actually. So if I scoot back into the seat, definitely have plenty of legroom, which is impressive. Actually, I think the second row, one thing Kia does really well is gives the second occupants a ton of space. It's really funny, like, you know, comparing EV9 to R1S, the second row an EV9 has so much more space. Like, I really just want to sit in the second row in the EV9 and be chauffeured by Kyle and Alyssa. Whereas like R1S, I have no space back there. My legs are literally like this in the back of the seat. It's really annoying. Not super impressed with that. So, love the space back here, but it's just this, like, really, it's so bad. Like, it's really bad. And I'm not just saying that. Like, these plastics absolutely feel like they're out of a $20,000 car. So I would say big negative there. Back here, we also have Type-C ports right here, which I do think is very nice. Kind of an odd location, I would say, but I seem to be using these quite a bit, especially us filming all the time. Our phones are constantly dead. So having multiple, you know, chargers in here is very important. Down here, we also have the 110 outlet, which is really neat. And then you have this completely blank space down here. Now, I would say it looks a little weird, looks very cheap, but the rationale behind this is instead of having the vents here, you have one on each side over here. Now, if you have rear occupants quite often, or especially like myself, have dogs, having the vents on that side, so much more convenient, because when you roll the seats down, the dogs are all trying to get in this one space right here, and this is really your only airflow back here, and they're all extremely hot, especially in the summer. So I think having it here blows it around the rear cabin quite a bit more and is a big benefit. So headroom, yeah, not great in here for sure. I mean, I would be comfortable to ride, you know, an hour, 2 hours back here. I'm definitely large, you know, I'm 6 foot and very overweight, but pretty impressed with the space down here. And if I kind of scooch my butt down and give myself less leg room, yeah, I still have decent headroom. I mean, my head doesn't touch until there, which you're not really sitting at. So I would say back seat space is quite adequate. One thing I will say is getting in here, as this roof line slopes down, you really have to dive your head under there. Whereas on the front end, it's quite a bit higher. It's kind of just this angle all the way down. So I do find myself smoking my head on this quite a bit. But I would say some positives back here. I love the space. The seats are still very nice. But then you have just cheap crap everywhere. Like, the plastics are absolutely terrible back here. Now, let's open up the rear trunk and talk about the space, because this is actually a great amount of space, even for being this coupe style SUV. So as you can see back here, I put in some floor mats so that the dogs don't tear up all of the carpet. Now, this carpet, absolutely terrible. Like, the cheapest carpet you can possibly put in a car. Not a big fan of that. Again, I know my annoyances as a professional detailer, but carpet really does matter. Now, over here, all of this plastic is the same stuff you see on the back of the seats. So this stuff, the problem with cheap plastic like this, it gets scratched up so easily. Like, you throw a TV or something back here, I don't know, you're moving something or just groceries, these are gonna get all scuffed up all over time. I personally would like to see a lot more carpet over this, and I think they can do even more sound insulation with that. One thing I haven't noticed, I'm curious if these are vents here. I haven't really played much with this, you know, for airflow for the dogs. Nice thing though, pull this, boom, seats fold flat. And then you have a massive amount of space. It is truly impressive how much space this actually is. Now, these don't fold completely flat. You can kind of see it's a little bit raised here. But again, even with those down, look how much space you still have here. So what's nice is with my 3 Coletons, we have 1 lay down here and then 2 kind of on the seats. And again, this is why I pulled the headrests off, because they kind of lay their paws here. So I think that's pretty darn decent. Now back here, what kind of space do we have in the under trunk storage? I know this mat is not ideal. And then under here we have kind of next to nothing, honestly. I mean, I am using this, so you can see we throw some towels in here for the dogs. These are the factory mats, which I need to take out because we have the all-weather mats. Back here you have your V2 L or G, I always forget the name of it. But basically it plugs into your J1772 port, and you can put in a 110 outlet and power whatever you need back there. So backspace back here, good. Cheap plastics, cheap carpet, not my biggest fan of that. Last thing let's check is the front trunk. So to open the front trunk here, it's like a traditional hood. No app or anything is gonna open this like the Teslas. Now, most people, so this is what happens when you leave the car running, I guess. It's just beeps, and if I tried to lock it, it would just keep doing that beep forever. But under here, this is our storage space. I am one of those people who actually uses my front trunk all the time. Now, I really like something like Rivian that has a powered one, so you're not having to like slam the hood shut and things like that. But this space is almost hilarious, I would say. So tiny. Like, okay, we do have the tire mobility kit in there, but you really can't fit much of anything else in here. So I would say, okay, it's great that they put it there. It's better than the ID4, which they just have all this space, like basically the same amount of space as this. And they just go, don't need it. So this is something, I mean, you can throw charging cables, you know, some other like recovery things or first aid kit or whatever you need to up here. But it's such a small amount of space. It's not really usable like either of the Model 3s here. So I would say that's a little bit of a negative. Now, one thing that I did not touch on, which we really need to talk about, is the NVH. So NVH stands for noise, vibration, and harshness in this. I gotta say, out of the 3 cars, well, I guess 4 EVs that we own, this one is absolutely the quietest, not only with road noise and tire noise, but with wind noise. This is very, very quiet. It's nowhere near something like Alyssa's Audi e-tron, which, you know, Kyle and I both kind of call the bank vault. Like, you close the doors on that, you don't hear anything around you. It is so silent, so unbelievably insulated from the outside world. This is like getting there. Like, it's super impressive. I'm in EVs all the time. The biggest issue with EVs, of course, you don't have a motor. So you hear naturally more wind noise, more road noise. And Kia's done a great job at actually insulating the cockpit in here, and I'm very impressed with it. It's actually kind of nice after working here at the shop all day, having music blaring, you know, power tools going and things like that, to just kind of ride home in a very quiet, comfortable vehicle. Suspension in this, nice and soft and supple. Like, we've lowered my Model 3 and things like that, so very different driving experience, but it's pretty impressive. Now, my entire impression about this car comes down to a few things. I think the base MSRP is very expensive for what you're getting for this when you can just go buy a Model Y. But I definitely think if you're in the market for this, look into leasing. If leasing makes sense for you, like it does me, it's a pretty darn good deal. This is the cheapest lease I've had in my entire life, and I've leased a ton of cars. I've purchased a bunch of cars. This is crazy cheap for what you get. But I think paying $55,000 MSRP and then paying 6.5–7% interest on a car like this is a lot. So do your research if you're interested in an EV6. What I would classify this as like a base headline, which will probably be what the title is of this car. This is a very well-built car with very cheap materials in it. The plastics in here are just crap. There's no better way in saying them. They feel like they're out of a $20,000 car. Like, you even go to something like a Bolt or, you know, GM products, which I always say have some of the worst plastics out there. And this is like right there with it. Terrible, terrible, terrible plastics. Now, That kind of stuff really annoys me in vehicles because I'm cleaning those often. They're also annoying because they get scratched up so easily. Something like the new Model 3 Performance that's back over here, you know, that's a $55,000 car and there's not a single piece of plastic in there. And there's, you know, quite a bit more content than you would have in this. So pros and cons in there. I mean, I have no complaints with how the car is built. This thing does not rattle. Both of my Teslas, after driving this, I jump in them and I'm just like, I'm driving a dump truck. Everything is rattling around. One of them has 5,000 miles on it. The other one has 30. Every single time I get in a Tesla, no matter if it's in the out-of-spec Cybertruck, whether it's in a Model S Plaid, whether it's in a Model 3, a Model Y, everything, they all creak, they all rattle, and it's so annoying. Kyle and I were talking about this the other day of just like, it is so frustrating because Tesla makes such nice contented vehicles and then they just slap them together and the whole cars just feel like they're rattling apart, and it's very frustrating and very annoying trying to chase rattles constantly, taking it into service. So again, the premise of this is like, yeah, the kind of obvious choice is just get a Model Y, but if that kind of stuff absolutely drives you nuts to where it doesn't outweigh all the positives that Tesla has, you may need to go look elsewhere. And honestly, the EV6, apart from the cheap plastics in it, is a very nice car. It's very quiet, very comfortable, and will absolutely smoke any Tesla on a charger. These things absolutely shred on DC fast chargers. So these are true road trip monsters. So very well built car, very cheap plastics, I think is my takeaway from it. At 55 grand, plastic should be better. At 187 bucks a month, I don't really care what the car is. It could be a Bolt for all I care. I've got a lot of car for my money here, so I'm thrilled with that. But I do think these should be a little nicer. And of course, we have the new refresh coming out, so we'll see on the EV6 if things have been improved. Thanks so much for watching. Very curious to see your comments and thoughts on the EV6 Wind all-wheel drive over here. Do you think it's adequate for the price, or should they have done better? Thanks so much for watching another out-of-spec detailing video. See you in the next one soon. Bye-bye.